It all started with a quiet morning in Rome, one of those mornings when the world seems calm on the surface, but something is already changing beneath it. Yaman had been avoiding the cameras for days. His team said he needed rest, that he was working on new projects, but those who knew him could sense there was more behind the silence. He was not the same man the world saw smiling on screen. Something had been haunting him. Sara had recently been seen spending time with Can's family. Pictures of her having coffee with his mother had surfaced online, and the rumors exploded instantly. The world began to ask, was Sara becoming part of the Yaman family? And if so, what did that mean for Demet Özdemir? Demet had kept her distance, focusing on her own projects, but deep down she couldn't ignore the noise. She had once known that family too well, the warmth, the laughter, the quiet dinners where Can's mother would speak with pride about her son's future. Those memories were impossible to forget. Then, out of nowhere, Can appeared in an interview. It was supposed to be light, a talk about his new projects, his time in Italy, maybe even his charity work. But halfway through, something shifted. The host mentioned Sara, and Can's face changed completely. For a moment, he said nothing. His eyes lowered, his lips pressed together. Then, almost like a confession, he began to speak, not about fame or success, but about family, about something the public had never heard before. Sara did something that I'll never forget, he said quietly. Something that surprised even my family, and maybe Demet too. The audience fell silent. Even the host seemed unsure if he should ask more. But Can continued, his tone softer now, almost nostalgic. Sometimes, we meet people who remind us of what we lost. Sara, she reminded me of that warmth, that simplicity. She did something kind, something I didn't expect. He didn't say what it was, not yet. But that single statement was enough to ignite a fire online. Social media exploded. Hashtags like #CanYamanTruth and #DemetReaction trended worldwide. And as for Demet, the news reached her within hours. Friends said she was stunned, that she watched the clip over and over again, her face frozen in disbelief. Because the truth Can hinted it wasn't just about Sara. It was about what he still carried inside. The next morning, the streets of Istanbul buzzed with gossip. Every entertainment outlet, from glossy magazines to small fan blogs, repeated the same question: what truth did Can reveal about Sara? And more importantly, why did Demet look so emotional after hearing it? Reporters were stationed outside Can's apartment in Rome, hoping for a glimpse, a word, anything. But Can stayed inside. His manager refused interviews. Still, leaks began to appear, people close to the actor started to talk. One of his old friends from Turkey claimed that what Can was referring to wasn't just about kindness. It was about something deeply personal, something tied to his family's past. Sara didn't just visit his mother, the friend said. She helped her through something difficult. That gesture touched Can more than he'll ever admit. The story went that Can's mother had been sick, nothing too serious, but enough to worry him while he was filming abroad. During that time, Sara quietly stepped in, offering help, visiting her, making sure she was never alone. No one had asked her to. She just did it. When Can found out, he was overwhelmed. It wasn't about romance or publicity, it was about humanity. Sara had earned the respect of his family in a way few ever had. And that was the truth he had hinted at. Demet, on the other hand, didn't know how to process it. She wasn't angry, but something inside her broke a little. Because once upon a time, she had been that person. She had shared that same connection with Can's family, that same warmth. Hearing that someone else had taken her place, even for good reasons, reopened old wounds. She told a close friend later that night, "It's strange. I'm happy for him. But it hurts too. Maybe because it reminds me of how close we once were." Meanwhile, Can's fans were divided. Some celebrated Sara's gesture, calling it beautiful and selfless. Others accused her of trying to replace Demet. The online war had begun. But Can didn't feed the fire. He disappeared again, no posts, no appearances, just silence. Because he knew what his words had done. Not just to the media, but to Demet. And deep down, even after all these years, that still mattered to him more than he wanted to admit. 3 days later, the calm finally shattered. A video surfaced online, a behind-the-scenes clip from the same interview where Can had spoken about Sara. The part that had been cut from the broadcast. In it, the host asked one more question: when you say Sara reminded you of something you lost, do you mean love? For a long moment, Can didn't answer. He smiled faintly, almost bitterly, then said, not love. Something even deeper, peace. That single word changed everything. Peace. It wasn't romantic, it was emotional, spiritual. It made people wonder, was he talking about the peace he once had with Demet? The peace he lost when fame, distance, and misunderstandings tore them apart. Fans began stitching together old clips, Can and Demet on set, laughing between takes, their chemistry effortless. Then photos of Can with Sara, calmer, quieter, more mature. The contrast was haunting. Demet herself couldn't avoid it. She was in a studio when the clip went viral. Her phone buzzed non-stop, texts, mentions, calls from reporters. A crew member whispered, "He mentioned you again." She pretended not to hear. But later, when she sat alone in her car, she opened the video. She watched him speak. The moment he said peace, her eyes filled with tears. Because she knew that word. It was the same one she had once written to him in a message long ago. A message he never answered. "I hope you find peace, even if it's not with me." Now, years later, he was saying it back to her, indirectly, in front of the whole world. That night, Demet wrote something cryptic on Instagram: "Sometimes the truth arrives late, but it still hits the heart." Within minutes, her followers connected the dots. Comments exploded, "She's talking about Can. She saw the interview. She still loves him." Meanwhile, Sara stayed quiet. No posts, no statements, no interviews. But insiders claimed she had seen the reaction too. Someone close to her said, Sara didn't expect this. She never wanted to come between them. What she did for his family was from the heart, not for attention. But the internet didn't care about intentions. It cared about drama. And for the first time in months, the Can Demet story was burning brighter than ever. As the night deepened, one thing became clear: what started as a kind gesture had turned into something much larger. A truth that connected three people, each caught between gratitude, regret, and love that refused to die. The next morning, the media frenzy reached a boiling point. Talk shows across Italy and Turkey ran the story non-stop. Headlines screamed, "Can Yaman speaks of peace, hidden message to Demet Özdemir?" Paparazzi swarmed outside both their homes. Every word, every move, every silence became a clue. But away from the chaos, Can sat alone in his apartment in Rome. The curtains were drawn, the city noise muffled by thick glass. His phone vibrated constantly, calls from his manager, missed calls from friends, and hundreds of notifications he ignored. What he couldn't ignore, however, was one message that came through from an unknown number. He opened it hesitantly. It read, "Peace. I still hope you find it." It was the same phrase. No name, no emoji, no explanation. But Can didn't need one. He knew who it was. Demet hadn't written to him in years, not since that final night when words had failed both of them. Yet now, she had. For a long time, he just stared at the message. A rush of memories hit him, their long nights filming, the laughter between takes, the quiet car rides back from set, the late-night calls that always ended in laughter and promises they never kept. He typed something back. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. The silence between them was heavier than any apology. He finally locked his phone and walked toward the balcony, letting the cool Roman air hit his face. Sara arrived later that afternoon, quietly. She had sensed the tension, the storm gathering online, and she wanted to face it before it swallowed everything. When she entered, Can was sitting on the sofa, lost in thought. You didn't mean for this to happen, she said softly. No, he replied. But maybe it needed to. Sara looked confused. What do you mean? For too long, people have made stories about us, about me and Demet, me and you. But what I said, it was the truth. You reminded me of the peace I'd lost. And maybe the world needed to hear that I can still feel something real. Sara smiled faintly, though there was sadness in her eyes. You know she saw it, right? Demet. He nodded. I know. They sat in silence for a while, two people caught in the middle of something bigger than themselves. Sara had never wanted to be compared to Demet. She admired her, even respected the history between them. But she could see now that some connections, no matter how much time passes, never truly fade. I didn't want to hurt her, she whispered. You didn't, Ken said quietly. But maybe I did. Outside, photographers snapped photos from a distance. To the world, it looked like another love triangle. But inside those walls, it was something much more human, forgiveness, understanding, and the echoes of a love that still lingered, even in silence. That evening, Rome's sunset burned red across the horizon, and for Ken, it felt like a sign, as if the day was closing a chapter he hadn't meant to reopen. The world kept spinning around him, headlines, speculation, gossip. Yet inside his apartment, time stood still. Sara had left quietly. Before going, she turned to him and said something he wouldn't forget. You can't carry the past forever, Ken. At some point, you have to let it rest, even if it still hurts. He nodded, but in his eyes there was that familiar heaviness, the kind that comes when the past and the present start to collide. Later that night, he went through an old box of photos. Not the ones his team shared online, the private ones, the real ones. There were pictures of him and Demet from the early days, before fame turned them into headlines. Moments that no fan ever saw, them laughing over spilled coffee, reading lines together, sneaking out for late dinners. He traced his finger over one of the photos, then closed his eyes. And suddenly, he was back there, back on that final night. The one where everything ended. It wasn't a dramatic fight, as many imagined. It was quiet. Too quiet. They had finished filming late. Demet had looked tired, distant. He remembered asking, "Are you okay?" She smiled faintly, just thinking. That's when she told him the words that never left him, if we keep trying to fix what broke, we'll forget why it mattered. He didn't know how to respond then. Maybe he still doesn't. When he opened his eyes again, he realized something had changed. The truth he'd spoken about Sara wasn't only about gratitude, it was a reflection of something missing inside him. Sara had reminded him what it felt like to care without pretending, to help without expectation. Something he once shared with Demet before the world turned it into a spectacle. Meanwhile, in Istanbul, Demet sat by her window, the city lights shimmering below. She had just finished watching one of their old interviews together, the one where he looked at her between lines, smiling when she forgot hers. She whispered to herself, he hasn't changed, he just hides it better now. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from Ken. It was from a journalist asking if she wanted to respond to his interview. She closed the notification without even reading it. She knew better than to feed the fire. But her heart wouldn't stay silent. So she opened her notes app and began to write, not for the public, not for social media, just for herself. Maybe love never really ends. It just finds new forms, in gestures, in silences, in people who remind us of what we once were. Maybe peace is just another name for love that survived the storm. When she finished, she stared at the words for a long time. Then she locked her phone and smiled sadly. Because deep down, she knew, somewhere in Rome, someone else was probably thinking the exact same thing. The following day, the story reached its emotional peak. Every TV channel replayed clips from Ken's interview, while social media flooded with fan theories. Some believed Ken had finally found closure, others said he was sending secret messages to Demet. But the truth was quieter, deeper, hidden behind the noise. That morning, Ken left Rome early. No one knew where he was going. His manager tried to call, but he had turned his phone off. He needed space, not from fame, not from the media, but from the confusion inside his own heart. He drove for hours along the Italian countryside, past the olive groves and the winding roads that led nowhere in particular. Eventually, he stopped near a small coastal village, the kind of place where no one recognized him. He walked along the beach, his shoes sinking into the sand, the sea wind pushing his thoughts back and forth like waves. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Peace, is this what it feels like?" He didn't notice at first, but there was someone else there, a local fisherman, sitting on an overturned boat, mending his nets. The man looked up and smiled. "You look like someone who's lost, but not in a bad way," he said in Italian. Ken smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just trying to find what I used to have." The man nodded. "Then don't look for it in places or people. Look for it in yourself." It was a simple sentence, but it hit him harder than expected. For so long, he had been chasing something, success, connection, understanding, but maybe what he needed wasn't to find it again. Maybe it was to make peace with everything that had already happened. Meanwhile, in Istanbul, Demet received a call from a journalist she actually trusted. The woman's tone was gentle. "Demet, I'm not asking for gossip. I just want to know, how do you feel about what he said?" For a moment, Demet didn't know what to answer. Then she simply said, "If what he found is peace, then I'm happy for him. Because I think that's what we both needed, all along." The journalist didn't push further. The quote made headlines the next day, but to Demet, it wasn't about publicity, it was about truth. Later that evening, she received a photo from a mutual friend in Italy. It was Ken, walking barefoot along a beach, wind in his hair, hands in his pockets. The caption said, "He looks calm again." Demet stared at the picture for a long time. Something about it felt final, yet comforting. She whispered quietly, "Then maybe it's really over. Or maybe, it's just a new beginning." Back on the Italian coast, as the sun began to set, Ken finally took out his phone. Dozens of unread messages blinked on the screen. But he only opened one, the last one Demet had sent. He didn't reply. Instead, he saved it. Then he put the phone back in his pocket and smiled faintly toward the horizon. Because for the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt anymore. Days passed, and the noise began to fade. The world moved on to new rumors, new stories, as it always does. But for Ken and Demet, something subtle had shifted. The chaos had left behind a strange calmness, a fragile kind of peace that neither had expected but both had needed. Ken stayed in that coastal village for a while. He rented a small house by the sea, no cameras, no lights, just the sound of the waves and his own thoughts. Every morning, he would wake early, make himself coffee, and walk barefoot to the shore. Locals soon got used to him. To them, he was just a quiet man with kind eyes and a familiar face they couldn't quite place. He began writing again, not scripts or lines for a role, but notes. Thoughts. Pieces of his life that he had kept locked away for too long. On one of those pages, he wrote, "Peace isn't found in the absence of people. It's found when you stop running from your own heart." Meanwhile, in Istanbul, Demet was preparing for a new project, a film that, ironically, dealt with themes of forgiveness and love after loss. During rehearsals, the director asked her to improvise a scene where her character had to forgive someone who never said sorry. Demet took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she wasn't acting anymore. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered the lines, her voice trembling, "I forgive you, not because you asked me to, but because I need to live again." The studio went silent. The director quietly said, "Perfect." After the shoot, Demet sat alone in her dressing room. She looked at her reflection, her eyes red but glowing in a strange way. She picked up her phone, scrolled to a name she hadn't dialed in years, Yaman. Her finger hovered over the screen. She hesitated, smiled faintly, and instead of calling, she took a photo of the sunset outside her window and sent it to him. No caption. just the image. In that moment, somewhere across the sea, Ken was also watching the same sunset. When his phone buzzed, he didn't need to check who it was. He already knew. He opened the photo, stared at it, and for a long time, he didn't move. Finally, he whispered, "You always knew what to say, even without words." He saved the photo, then typed a short reply, "It's beautiful." Just like before. He didn't hit send immediately. His thumb hovered over the screen, then pulled back. Instead, he left it there, unsent, but alive, like a thought waiting for the right time. That night, as he walked along the empty beach, he looked up at the stars. He thought about everything: fame, love, mistakes, silence, and he realized something. He didn't regret any of it. Because even through all the noise, all the distance, the story they shared had never really ended. It had simply transformed. The next morning came with the gentlest light, soft, golden, and quiet, as if the world itself wanted to pause for a moment. Ken woke early again, his mind unusually calm. He brewed his coffee, opened the balcony doors, and let the ocean breeze fill the room. The air smelled like salt and freedom. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel watched, judged, or misunderstood. He just was. He reached for his notebook, the same one filled with thoughts and unfinished sentences, and wrote down a single line: "To heal, I had to stop pretending the story was over." His phone buzzed. This time, it wasn't the usual flood of notifications. Just one message. From Demet. She had replied to the photo he never sent. The unsent message that somehow, miraculously, had found its way through. Or maybe fate had its own strange timing. The message read, "Some stories don't end. They just learn to breathe differently." Ken froze, reading it over and over. His heart tightened, but not in the painful way it used to. This time, it was something else, something softer, almost like peace finally had a face. He smiled and whispered, "You're right, Demet. Maybe that's how we survive it." Then, without overthinking, he replied, "Thank you, for the photo, for the silence, for everything we never said." He didn't expect an answer. He didn't need one. Far away in Istanbul, Demet was sitting by her window again, the morning light tracing her face. When she saw his message, she didn't cry this time. She just smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, the kind that comes when something inside you finally settles.